sister Alexis was straight up obsessed with me. When I was 10, some dirtbag tried to snatch her. I ended up in his car instead. They got their ransom, and I came home. But my face was sliced up pretty bad. My legs were broken too. Alexis went into overdrive. She took over Dad's business and turned it into a freaking empire. I became the center of her universe. Also, her untouchable nerve. Some jerk at school called me Scarface. Alexis shoved his head into a trash can full of rats that he was barely recognizable. Another kid whispered I was a cripple. Alexis ran him over with a steamroller, turning his legs into hamburger. Alexis was a stone-cold killer to everyone in town except me. She spoiled me rotten. She dropped a ton of cash on reconstructive surgery, fixed my legs, and sent me to college overseas. Right before I came home, I got a wedding invitation from her. She was so excited, said I was getting a new brother-in-law who would love me just as much. She even sent me a picture of the lucky dude that I walked into the house. And this guy, her fiancé, busted in with a bunch of goons that he thought I was the boy toy Alexis was keeping on the side that he started beating the crap out of me. Alexis finally showed up and he pointed at me, lying on the floor, and whined, "Am I not good enough for you? Is he better than me?" Alexis's eyes went red. "You don't have enough lives to be compared to him." Bang! The sliding glass door exploded. A bunch of tough-looking guys stormed in that I was still trying to figure out what was going on when I saw the dude in the lead, the one from Alexis's picture. My future brother-in-law, Jason. Before I could even say hello, he swung a metal baseball bat straight into my face that my nose exploded in pain. Warm liquid trickled down. Blood. The blow caught me completely off guard, and my head was spinning, so I finally caught your ass. "Boy toy, thought you could hide overseas forever." Jason screamed that he raised the bat again, aiming for my head and body, that I scrambled back, trying to protect my head, and tripped, landing hard on the floor. "You've got this all wrong! Before I could finish, Jason jammed the bat into my mouth. Shoving it back and forth, pain shot through my face that a metallic taste filled my throat that I choked, spitting out a mouthful of blood. "Wrong, my ass. Don't think I don't know you manipulated Alexis into buying you this house. You knew I was marrying Alexis, so you wanted to come back and interfere. Even if you're not successful, you can still be a sugar baby, right? Today I'm gonna show you what happens to homewreckers." He kicked me, sending me sprawling. The back of my head slammed against the edge of the coffee table. The NY scalp split open. Desperate and angry, I swallowed the blood and said, "You've got this completely wrong. I'm Alexis's brother. She sent me a message a few days ago, telling me to come home for the wedding." Jason froze. One of the goons stepped forward and whispered, "I did hear the boss had a brother who's been living overseas for years, but we've never seen him. I heard the boss has a twin brother." Jason glanced at my face. "Twins? This boy toy doesn't look anything like Alexis." Just then, another guy walked in. His face was all scarred up. It was Danny, Alexis' right-hand man. He's been with Alexis forever. He should recognize me. "Danny, it's me, Frankie." I barely got the words out, and Danny looked over, confused. Who the hell is this guy? How does he know my name? Danny was suspicious, but Jason swung the bat at my mouth, hitting me hard. I couldn't talk anymore. "He's the boy toy I was telling you about. He must have heard us talking." Danny shook his head. "That's not right." He said his name was Frankie, and Frankie is the little boss's name. No one knows that. He rushed over, grabbed my face, and started looking me over. This face doesn't look anything like the little boss's face. My heart sank that I'd had so much work done. He wouldn't recognize me. Wait a minute, the little boss was sent out to get plastic surgery. Did you get your face done? Danny was starting to remember that. I nodded, pleading with him. Yes, I'm their boy. Jason didn't believe it. A pretty boy who lives off his face, of course he's had work done. Danny held up his hand. Faces can be faked, but not identity. Let's check his ID. Two goons grabbed me and started to search me that I twisted, trying to get away, and Jason slapped me hard across the face. "Hold still, tie him up." The goons tied me up tight that I was searched. Danny was getting worried. "Why'd you beat him up like this? What if he really is the little boss?" Jason laughed and offered him a cigarette. "What's the problem? I'm marrying Alexis. If I beat her brother by mistake, it just proves I love her and she'll forgive me." Danny took a drag. Good point. They found my ID in my pocket. Jason snatched it and burst out laughing. "See? I told you he was lying." Danny leaned over and slowly read the name, Jack Smith. Then he opened my diploma, John Smith. He's a fake. The little boss name is Frankie Miller. He went to Korea, not England. My heart dropped after what happened. Alexis took me out of the system. She changed my last name to my mom's name. She didn't want me to be kidnapped again, so she kept it a secret from everyone. Did Alexis do it to protect me? "Alexis, you're going to get me killed." I was panicked. Danny's eyes turned cold. "This punk is pretending to be the little boss. Get him." They knocked me to the ground and started kicking me. Damn, my phone fell out of my pocket. When the screen lit up, Danny saw my wallpaper. His face changed. Wait, the wallpaper was a picture of me and Alexis. Danny picked it up, his hand shaking. Is this your phone? I nodded frantically. Jason rolled his eyes. Danny, it's just a picture. He probably photoshopped it. I made wild gestures, trying to get Danny to open the phone. He understood. He put the phone to my face to unlock it, and pulled up the text between me and Alexis. His contact name for the boss is to sister. Danny was shocked. Jason grabbed my phone. This boy toy is the type to call everyone to sister. That's how he manipulates them. Don't fall for it. He swiped up a few times and exploded. She didn't just buy you a house. She called you baby and said she never wanted to be apart from you again. I wanted to explain, but my mouth was too damaged. Alexis is my only family. She doesn't want me overseas forever. No one's ever laid a hand on me before, and now I was beaten by her fiancé and gagged. Her own man didn't recognize me. Alexis, it hurts so much I started crying. And Danny frowned. He's got the same personality as the little boss. Can't take any kind of hardship. Loves to cry. Should we double check? The boss is obsessed with the little boss. If it's really him, we're screwed. Jason nodded. Fine. I'll call and ask if he really is Alexis's brother. I'll take the fall, but if he isn't, his face twisted. I'll make this boy toy wish he'd never been born. He had the goons gag me and dialed Alexis. Hey babe, you said your brother was coming for the wedding, right? What day does he get in? I want to get him a gift. Alexis sounded happy. That's so sweet of you. He said he'd be there tomorrow night. I felt a chill run down my spine that I changed my ticket to today to surprise Alexis. Jason stared at me, his eyes narrowing. If he hung up, everything would be over. I bit down hard on the goon's hand. He yelled and let go. Alexis, help me, I shouted. Jason's face went red. He kicked me to the ground and stepped on my mouth. Alexis sounded worried. I think I heard someone say, help. Jason forced a smile. It's just the TV. My brother is coming home, so I need to get a gift ready. I'll talk to you later. He hung up. Despair washed over me. Jason pressed down harder. You tricked me, almost fooled me. I cried harder. He still wasn't satisfied. He stared at my tear-streaked face. You're the reason Alexis likes you. She was going to marry me, but she still bought you a house, one of the goons told him. It's not that surprising. Bosses like to keep people on the side since she likes him. Should we let him go? You're the one marrying her anyway. It's fine if you turn a blind eye, Danny agreed. Yeah, you're the primary partner. It's not a big deal. Jason wavered. The injustice of it all overwhelmed me that I was Alexis's brother, treated like a boy toy. She has terrible taste in men that I'm making her cancel the wedding. Jason saw my anger and flipped out. You dare glare at me? I'll ruin you. He stepped back and pulled out a knife, going for my face. No! I screamed. Jason kept going. After you're ugly, Alexis will love me. The pain kept coming that I almost passed out. Alexis spent a fortune finding doctors to fix this face that it's over now. Alexis won't let him live. You're dead, I said to him. And Jason exploded. What did you say? He slashed at my lips, cursed me now. I couldn't speak anymore. Jason was about to keep going when they heard high heels. Boss, why are you here, Alexis? I struggled, trying to get up, and pain shot through my leg. Jason broke my knee. Danny's face changed that he told Jason to hide me. She can't see him. She'll get angry. Jason and the goons dragged me into the kitchen and Alexis walked in. Danny, didn't I tell you to start decorating? Where's everything? I just got here. It's in the car. I'll get them to unload it. Danny and the goons left. Alexis walked around the house. It looks good. He'll like it. Is this the kitchen? She asked the designer and went for the door. I saw her shadow through the glass and started crying. Alexis, save me. Alexis opened the door. She saw Jason and me on the floor and was shocked. Jason? What are you doing here? Who is that? She said, pointing at me. Alexis, it's me. Recognize me. I crawled towards her. Jason kicked me in the face. Shut up. I tried to say something, but Jason hit me again. Don't call her sister in front of me. Alexis froze. She knelt down and stared at me. Jason spoke first. Babe, I know. He's your boy toy, right? You bought him this house. I'm fine with that. You're successful. It's normal. Jason started to cry. I just wanted to see what makes you like him. I can copy him so you'll love me more. Alexis hugged him. What are you saying? I only love you. I wouldn't be marrying you otherwise. Honey, this house is for my brother. He's coming home tomorrow. I wanted to surprise him. You must have misunderstood. Who is he? I don't have a boy toy. Jason realized what happened. His face went white. He offended me. I was teaching him a lesson. Alexis frowned. He offended you? Okay, but you shouldn't have brought him to my brother's house. How unlucky. We have bad luck before we have the blessing from God, Jason said. I get it. I'll have him taken care of right away. We'll get a priest to ward off the bad luck. Tomorrow, I'll apologize to your brother. He won't be mad, right? Alexis smiled. He won't blame you. I was dragged out, panicking that he was going to have me killed, that he knew who I was. He wasn't taking any chances that I fought and got slapped. You're dead now. Take him away. Jason rushed them. Danny walked in with the god of the kitchen that he saw Alexis's face and said, Boss, We didn't want to spill blood, but he pretended to be your brother. Jason tried to stop him, but it was too late. Alexis pounced on it. He pretended to be Frankie. Danny nodded. Yeah, it's not believable. We checked his ID as the wrong name. He showed Alexis the IDs. Alexis' face went white. What's going on? Alexis's face went white as she stared at the IDs in Danny's hands, her fingers twitching slightly before she grabbed them. Her eyes darted between the names, the documents, then slowly, almost mechanically, shifted to Jason. Her fiancé, the man she had chosen, stood there, stiff and silent, his jaw clenched so tightly a vein bulged at his temple. Jason swallowed hard. Babe, listen, But Alexis wasn't listening. Her grip on the papers tightened until they crumpled in her hand. Her gaze finally dropped to me, still on the floor, barely conscious, blood pooling beneath me, my breathing ragged. My face, the one she had spent a fortune reconstructing, was now ruined again, split open by the man she had planned to marry. Jason must have sensed the shift in the air because he took a careful step back. Alexis, babe, you know I love you. But Alexis wasn't even looking at him anymore. She crouched down, her manicured fingers brushing against my swollen, bleeding cheek, her touch as light as a whisper. Frankie? Her voice trembled, almost too soft to hear. I tried to answer, but my lips were too torn, my throat too raw from choking on my own blood. Tears burned my eyes as I stared up at her, pleading without words. Boss, Danny started, his voice unsure, hesitant, but Alexis raised a hand, silencing him. The room was deathly quiet. Jason licked his lips nervously. I swear, babe, I thought he was... Alexis stood. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She turned to Jason, and when she spoke, her voice was dangerously calm. You beat my brother. Jason flinched. You cut his face. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached into her coat, fingers curling around something. You broke his knee. Alexis. Wait, you made him beg for his life in his own house. She exhaled, long and slow, then lifted her head. Her eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were now void of emotion, dark as a storm. Jason took another step back, his entire body tensed, ready to bolt, but it was too late. Bang. The sound of the gunshot shattered the silence. Jason screamed, clutching his thigh as he collapsed to the floor. The gun in Alexis's hand was still smoking, her grip steady, her stance unshaken. Blood spread across Jason's pants as he writhed, his breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. You shot me, he choked out. Alexis tilted her head, expression unreadable. I missed. Jason's eyes went wide. Alexis, bang. Another shot, his other leg. The scream that ripped from his throat was hoarse, raw, animalistic. The goons who had been standing idly, watching, suddenly panicked, backing away. Danny, frozen at first, took a slow, deep breath. Boss, if you keep going... I'm just getting started, she murmured. Jason tried to crawl away, but Alexis stepped on his chest, pinning him down effortlessly with the heel of her stiletto. He let out a strangled gasp, his hands shaking as they clutched at his bleeding legs. Please, he whimpered. Please, babe, Don't call me that. Her voice was so cold it sent chills through the room. She crouched down again, gripping Jason's chin so hard he whimpered. You know what the biggest mistake of your life was? He couldn't answer, his lips trembling too much. You thought you could lay a hand on my brother and live. Jason sobbed. Please, Alexis! She let go of his chin, watching him collapse into the floor. Then, without another word, she turned to Danny. Take Frankie to the hospital. Danny hesitated, glancing at Jason, who was still moaning in pain. Boss, what about... I'll handle this. Danny didn't argue. He crouched beside me, his expression still guarded, conflicted. Can you stand? I tried, but the pain shot through me so violently that I nearly blacked out. Danny clicked his tongue, muttering a curse before he lifted me into his arms effortlessly. I groaned, my body too weak to resist, my head lolling against his shoulder. Hang in there, little boss, he murmured. She's pissed now, but you're safe. Safe. The word barely registered. As my vision blurred, I caught a final glimpse of Alexis standing over Jason, her gun still in her hand, her face eerily calm. Alexis, Jason sobbed, I love you. She stared down at him for a long, unreadable moment. Then, finally, she smiled. I know. I didn't see what happened next. The world faded to black. I woke up to the steady beeping of a heart monitor, my entire body feeling like it had been set on fire and left to burn. My head throbbed, my mouth was dry, and every breath sent a dull ache through my ribs. The fluorescent lights above me were too bright, stabbing into my skull like needles. The hospital. I was in a hospital. Blinking through the haze, I tried to move, but my limbs felt like lead. A shadow shifted beside me, and then a voice, low and rough, cut through the fog. "You're awake." Danny. His face came into focus slowly, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't slept in days. His usually neat shirt was wrinkled, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw, my lips cracked. Danny sighed, reaching for a cup of water. "Here, don't talk yet." He held the straw to my lips and I drank greedily, the cool liquid soothing the burning in my throat. When I finally managed to croak out a sound, it was barely a whisper. "Alexis." Danny's jaw tightened. "She's fine." The way he said it made my stomach twist. "What?" My voice broke. "What happened?" Danny ran a hand over his face, exhaling through his nose. "She handled it." I swallowed, the taste of blood still lingering in my mouth. "Jason?" Danny didn't answer right away. He looked at me, really looked at me, like he was trying to decide whether or not I could handle the truth. Finally, he spoke. "Gone." My heart pounded painfully against my ribs. "Dead?" "No." He hesitated. "Not yet. Yet." The words sent a chill down my spine. Danny leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "After we got you out, she took her time with him." His voice was low, like he didn't want to say it out loud. "He's alive, but barely. She's making an example out of him." I squeezed my eyes shut, the memories slamming back into me all at once. The beating, the knife against my face, the feeling of helplessness as Jason and his men laughed at my pain. I should have felt relief. I should have felt justice. But all I felt was exhaustion. Danny watched me carefully. "She told me to stay with you until you woke up." "Where is she?" I managed to ask. "Cleaning up the mess." The way he said it made my stomach churn. Alexis doesn't let things go unfinished. My throat tightened. I didn't doubt it. Jason was as good as dead, and maybe he deserved it. But something about the way Danny looked at me, the flicker of uncertainty in his usually unshakable gaze, made me wonder if even he thought Alexis was going too far. The door creaked open, and a woman in a white coat stepped in. The doctor. "You're lucky," she said, checking my IV. "With the injuries you had, it could have been much worse." She glanced at Danny. "Give us a moment?" Danny hesitated, then nodded, standing up. "I'll be outside." As soon as the door shut behind him, the doctor turned to me, her expression softening. "Your sister? She's terrifying." I blinked. That was the last thing I expected a doctor to say. She shook her head, muttering to herself. "She paid off half the hospital to clear the floor. No security cameras, no records, nothing. If I didn't know better, I'd say she owns this place." I swallowed hard. That sounded like Alexis. The doctor sighed. "You're stable for now, but your knee." Her gaze dropped to my leg, wrapped in thick bandages and elevated. "The damage was bad. Even with surgery, you might not recover full mobility." My stomach dropped. "You're saying I'll be crippled?" "I'm saying it'll take time. And even then, you might not be the same." The words hit harder than I expected. Alexis had spent years making sure I was whole again, fixing what had been broken. And now, after all that, I was back to square one. The doctor must have seen the look on my face because she sighed. "Your sister will make sure you get the best care. You already know that." I did. But that wasn't what worried me. What worried me was what Alexis would do to Jason once she found out. As if on cue, the door opened again, and this time, it wasn't Danny. Alexis walked in like she owned the place, her heels clicking against the tile, a presence so sharp it could cut glass. Her hair was immaculate, her makeup flawless, but there was something in her eyes, something darker than usual. "Frankie." Her voice was soft, too soft. She approached the bed, kneeling beside me, her fingers ghosting over my hand. "You're awake." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. Alexis had always been my protector, my shield, my everything. But now looking at her, I realized something. She wasn't just protecting me, she was avenging me. "Jason," I started, but she placed a finger over my lips. "Shh." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You don't have to worry about him anymore." A cold shiver ran through me. "Alexis." "I took care of it," she said simply. "No one will ever hurt you again." My heart pounded. "What did you do?" She tilted her head, eyes gleaming with something unreadable. "Do you really want to know?" A lump formed in my throat. "Alexis." She reached into her pocket, pulling out something small and silver. My breath caught. A ring. Jason's engagement ring. I stared at it, my chest tightening. Alexis twirled it between her fingers, watching me carefully. "I told you, Frankie." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You're the only man in my life." I felt sick. This wasn't just about protecting me. This was about ownership, control. Love twisted into something unrecognizable. My sister had always been obsessed with me. But now, I realized something. This wasn't just obsession. This was devotion. Worship. And Jason? Jason was just the first sacrifice. I couldn't look away from the ring in Alexis's hand, Jason's ring, now nothing more than a trophy. The weight of what she had done, of what she was capable of, pressed down on my chest like a heavy stone. My mind screamed at me to say something, to push back, to remind her that this wasn't normal, that she couldn't just erase people from existence because they hurt me. But my mouth stayed shut, lips trembling, body frozen. She tilted her head, watching me with an unreadable expression, waiting for my reaction. When I didn't speak, she reached forward, her fingers brushing against my cheek, her touch feather-light, a stark contrast to the chaos she had unleashed. "You're safe now," she murmured, as if that justified everything. Safe. The word felt hollow. Safe from what? From Jason? From the world? Or from the lengths she was willing to go to for me? Danny had said she was making an example out of him, but now, staring at her, I realized something. It wasn't just about Jason. It was about everyone. A message to the world. Hurt Frankie, and you disappear. "Alexis," I finally croaked, my throat raw, my voice weak. "You..." "Shh." She cut me off, her thumb tracing over my lower lip, her brows furrowing as if she were memorizing the damage. "He did this to you. I should have acted sooner." There was something terrifying about how gentle she was. How her anger never manifested in shouting or violence, at least not in front of me. No, Alexis's rage was cold, controlled, a blade instead of a hammer. And that was what made her so dangerous. My fingers curled into the hospital sheets, my mind racing. I had to tread carefully. "I don't want people to die because of me," I whispered. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, something sharp. "They don't die because of you, Frankie," she said softly. "They die because they made the mistake of thinking they could touch what's mine." My blood ran cold. Hers. I wasn't just her brother. I was her possession, and that terrified me more than anything Jason had done. The door opened before I could respond, and Danny stepped back in, his eyes flicking between us, reading the tension in the air. "Boss," he said carefully, addressing Alexis, not me. "We need to talk." Alexis sighed, straightening, slipping the ring back into her pocket like it was nothing. "Not now, Danny." "Now," he insisted. His tone was firm, but there was something else beneath it. Urgency. Alexis narrowed her eyes but didn't argue. She stood, smoothing out her dress like nothing had happened, then leaned down, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "Rest," she murmured. "I'll handle everything." And with that, she was gone, following Danny out of the room, leaving me alone with nothing but my thoughts and the beeping of the machines. My heart pounded in my chest, my body screaming at me to move, to do something, anything. I needed to get out of here. I needed to think. I needed to breathe. But my body was broken. My knee shattered, my face swollen, my ribs aching, and worst of all, Alexis was still out there, still making decisions, still moving pieces on the board that I didn't even know existed. I wasn't safe. Not from Jason, not from Alexis, not from the world she had built around me. And the worst part? I didn't know if I even wanted to be. The hospital room felt smaller the longer I lay there, the white walls pressing in on me, suffocating. My mind wouldn't stop racing, replaying every moment since I'd returned home. The way Jason had looked at me with hatred, the way Alexis had looked at him like he was nothing, the way she had spoken about me, about my safety, as if I were some sacred thing that had to be protected at any cost. It wasn't love. It was obsession. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized it had always been that way. She hadn't just taken over Dad's business to prove something to the world. She had done it for me. Every move, every decision, every drop of blood spilled in her rise to power had been for me. And now, Jason was gone because of me too. My stomach churned, but I swallowed the sickness down, trying to focus on something, anything, other than the reality that Alexis had murdered her own fiancé without hesitation. What did that mean for me? What did that make me? My eyes darted to the door, half expecting it to open again, half expecting Alexis to walk in and press another kiss to my forehead like everything was fine. But it didn't open. Not yet. And I wasn't waiting around for her to make another decision about my life without me. Gritting my teeth, I forced myself to move, pain exploding through my ribs and leg as I tried to sit up. My body screamed in protest, but I didn't care. I needed to get out of here. I swung my good leg over the side of the bed, fingers gripping the sheets so tightly my knuckles turned white, and tried to stand. My knee buckled immediately and I collapsed, biting down hard on my lip to keep from crying out. The last thing I needed was a nurse walking in and alerting Alexis. She probably had half the hospital on her payroll, watching me, making sure I didn't do something stupid. But I had to try. Gritting my teeth, I grabbed the IV stand, using it to balance myself, sweat breaking out on my forehead as I forced my body to cooperate. One step, then another. The pain was unbearable, but I pushed through it, ignoring the way my vision blurred at the edges. I had to move. I had to go. The moment I reached the door, it swung open, and my heart nearly stopped. Danny. His sharp eyes scanned me in an instant, taking in my pathetic attempt to escape, and then he sighed, shaking his head like a disappointed teacher catching a student cheating on a test. "Where exactly do you think you're going?" he asked, stepping inside and closing the door behind him, blocking my way. I tightened my grip on the IV stand, my pulse pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. "I need air," I rasped, my voice weak, my throat dry. Danny studied me for a long moment before stepping closer, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't noticed before. Pity. "You don't get it, do you?" he murmured. "You think you're a prisoner, but you're not. You're the reason any of this exists. If you walk out of here, if something happens to you, the whole world burns." I clenched my jaw, hating the way his words sent a shiver down my spine. "I never asked for any of this." Danny exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Yeah, well, neither did the rest of us." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I could see it in his face, the exhaustion, the resignation. He had been by Alexis's side for years, watching as she built her empire, watching as she turned into whatever she was now. And through it all, he had stayed. Not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice, just like me. "She's going to find out what you tried to do," Danny said after a long pause, "and it's going to break her heart." I swallowed, my throat tight. She's the one breaking mine. Danny's expression softened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he reached out, wrapping an arm around my waist, supporting my weight without asking. "Come on," he murmured. "Get back in bed before you pass out." I wanted to fight him. I wanted to scream, but I was too tired, too broken. So I let him help me back onto the bed, let him adjust the pillows behind me, let him press a cup of water into my hands. And then he sat down, watching me with something almost like sympathy. "She's not going to stop," I whispered. "Is she?" Danny shook his head. "No, not until there's nothing left to protect you from." A chill ran through me. What if the thing I need protection from is her? Danny didn't answer. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes said it all. The hospital room was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, a mocking reminder that I was still alive, still breathing, still trapped in this twisted reality that Alexis had built for me. Danny hadn't moved from his chair, his sharp eyes watching me like a hawk, making sure I didn't try anything else. My failed escape attempt had only proven one thing. I was too weak to fight this alone. My body was broken, my mind barely holding on, and Alexis had wrapped her web so tightly around me that even if I ran, I'd never get far. I felt like a caged animal, one that had never even realized it was in a cage until the door slammed shut. Danny exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face, and I could tell he wanted to say something. Maybe an apology, maybe a warning. But instead, he just shook his head. "She's coming," he finally said, his voice quiet. My heart twisted in my chest. Of course she was. I'd seen her snap Jason's neck like it was nothing, like he was nothing, and yet somehow I wasn't scared of her. Not the way I should be. Maybe because deep down, I knew she would never hurt me. But that didn't mean I was safe. That didn't mean I could just sit here and accept whatever version of reality she wanted me to live in. The door creaked open before I could respond, and there she was, standing in the doorway like a queen surveying her kingdom. Alexis. Her long black coat draped over her shoulders like a cape, her heels clicking against the tile as she stepped inside, and for a moment all I could do was stare. She didn't look like someone who had just killed her fiancé. She didn't look like someone who had just torn apart her own life. No, she looked victorious, like she had won. "Frankie," she breathed, her voice dripping with relief. I swallowed hard, forcing my hands to stay still on the blanket. "Alexis." Her gaze flicked to Danny for a split second, and he stood up without a word, leaving the room like he knew better than to interfere. The moment the door shut behind him, Alexis moved closer, sitting on the edge of my bed, her fingers reaching out to brush against my cheek, and I flinched before I could stop myself. Something dark flickered in her eyes, something hurt, something angry, but she smothered it quickly, her hand dropping back to her lap. "Are you in pain?" she asked softly. "They told me your knee was broken, and your ribs." "I'm fine," I cut her off, my voice hoarse. A lie. I was anything but fine, but I wasn't about to admit that to her. Alexis tilted her head, studying me like she was trying to see inside my skull, trying to unravel every thought running through my mind. "I missed you," she said after a moment, her lips curling into something that might have been a smile if it weren't so empty. "Did you miss me?" I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to hold her gaze. "Did you kill him?" The smile vanished. Her expression hardened, her eyes going cold in an instant, and I could see the walls go up, the ones she only ever lowered for me. "Does it matter?" she asked flatly. My stomach twisted. "Alexis." "He hurt you," she said, her voice sharp. "He hurt you, and he disrespected me. I told you before, no one lays a hand on you and walks away." My fingers curled into the blanket. "You were going to marry him, and now I'm not." She reached out again, this time grabbing my hand, squeezing it between her own. "You're the only man in my life that matters, Frankie. No one else comes close, you know that." My breath caught in my throat. There it was again, that obsession, that desperate, unwavering devotion that was equal parts terrifying and intoxicating. She wasn't lying. She believed every word she said, and that was the problem. "I don't want this," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. "I don't want any of this." Alexis didn't flinch, didn't let go, didn't even blink. "Then what do you want?" she asked, her voice soft, dangerous. I swallowed hard, my mind screaming at me to lie, to tell her what she wanted to hear, to survive. But I was so damn tired. "I want to leave." The words barely made it past my lips before her grip on my hand tightened, her nails digging into my skin, her entire body going rigid. And then, just as quickly as the tension appeared, it was gone. She smiled, slow, sweet, almost gentle. "You just got home," she said, as if I hadn't spoken. "You're not thinking clearly. You're in pain. You're confused. But don't worry. I'll take care of everything. I'll make sure you're comfortable. "Alexis," I said, louder this time, yanking my hand free. "I'm serious." The smile didn't waver, but the temperature in the room dropped. I could feel it. The shift. The crack in her perfect mask. "You don't mean that," she murmured. "You can't mean that." "I do," I said, forcing myself to sit up despite the pain, forcing myself to look her in the eye. "I need to go, Alexis. I need to get out of here. I need to... No." The word was sharp, absolute, final. A command, not a request. My chest tightened. "Alexis." "No," she said again, standing up so suddenly that the bed shook. "You're not leaving. You're not going anywhere. This is your home. I built this for you. Everything I've done has been for you." Her voice was rising now, something raw slipping into it, something desperate. "I kept you safe. I made sure no one could ever hurt you again. And now you want to leave me?" "I'm not a child," I snapped, my patience breaking. "I don't need you to protect me." A bitter laugh slipped past her lips. "Don't you?" She took a step closer, towering over me, her presence suffocating. "Because last time I checked, you ended up in a hospital bed covered in bruises and broken bones. And if I hadn't been there, if I hadn't taken care of it, you'd be dead." "That was because of you," I shot back. "Because of the world you built around me. Because people are scared of you, Alexis, because you don't let me live my own life." Her jaw clenched, her breathing uneven. "You are my life." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "That's not healthy," I whispered. "That's not love." "Yes, it is," she said, her voice breaking. "It's the only love that matters." A knock at the door made us both freeze, the tension in the air so thick I could barely breathe. Danny's voice filtered through the wood, careful, calculated. "Boss, we have a situation." Alexis didn't move at first. She just stared at me, something unreadable in her eyes, something I couldn't even begin to decipher. Then finally, she took a slow breath, smoothing out the fabric of her coat, and turned toward the door. "I'll handle it." She glanced back at me once, just for a second, and then she was gone. The moment the door shut behind her, I exhaled shakily, my whole body trembling. I had pushed her, harder than I ever had before, and now I had no idea what she was going to do next. But one thing was clear. I was running out of time. Frankie lay in the dark, his body racked with pain, his breath shallow. His mind swirled between rage, fear, and betrayal, the events of the last few hours replaying like a nightmare on an endless loop. He had been dragged out of his own home, beaten to near unconsciousness, and thrown into the back of a van like garbage. His face throbbed, his ribs ached, and his knee was twisted at an unnatural angle thanks to Jason's brutality. But the worst pain came from the realization that Alexis, his own sister, had stood there, listening to Jason's lies, hesitating. She should have known. She should have recognized him instantly. Frankie had spent his whole life as the center of her world. How could she not see it? Or maybe she had seen it and refused to accept it, refused to admit that she had let the wrong man into her life, that she had allowed Jason to do this to her only family. The van hit a pothole, jolting him, making him groan. One of Jason's goons, seated across from him, smirked. "Not so tough now, huh? All that crying? You're just some pretty little thing she picked up. Boss should have killed you back at the house." Frankie glared at him but couldn't muster the strength to respond. His jaw was swollen, and every movement sent fresh waves of agony through his skull. His hands were zip-tied behind his back, his ankles bound. He was utterly helpless. He had to think. Jason wasn't just going to let him go. He had seen the look in his eyes. Jason had realized his mistake, realized that he had brutalized Alexis's actual brother, and instead of owning up to it, he had decided to erase the problem, kill Frankie, dump his body, and make sure no one ever found out. That was Jason's plan. And Alexis? Would she even realize in time? Would she even care? The van slowed, turning off the main road. Gravel crunched beneath the tires. They were going somewhere remote, somewhere Jason could finish what he started. Frankie's heart pounded. No, he wouldn't die like this. Not beaten, not discarded, not forgotten. He couldn't let Jason win. He shifted, testing his restraints. The zip ties cut into his wrists, but he ignored the pain. He could feel his phone still in his pocket, but there was no way he could reach it. They hadn't even bothered to check for weapons. They thought he was too weak, too broken to fight back. That was their mistake. The van came to a stop. The back doors swung open, and rough hands yanked Frankie out, throwing him onto the dirt. The cold night air hit him like a slap. He could smell the dampness of the forest, the scent of wet earth. A clearing, isolated, perfect for murder. Jason stepped out of the front seat, adjusting his sleeves, his expression calm. "You've been a real pain in the ass, you know that?" he said, stepping toward Frankie. "I don't even know why she cares about you so much. All this trouble for some little pet project." Frankie coughed, blood dribbling from his lips. "You're making a mistake," he managed to say. Jason laughed, kneeling in front of him. "Oh, I made a mistake, all right. I should have done this earlier." He pulled a gun from his waistband, pressing the barrel against Frankie's forehead. "Any last words, boy toy?" Frankie stared at him, his mind racing. Think. Then, in the distance, the unmistakable roar of an engine. Several engines. Headlights cut through the trees, illuminating the clearing. Jason frowned, standing up. The goons shifted nervously. Tires screeched as 3 black SUVs skidded into the clearing surrounding them. The doors flew open. Armed men in black suits poured out, guns drawn. And then, from the lead car, she emerged. Alexis. Her face was unreadable, her eyes cold as death. She didn't look at Jason. She didn't look at the goons. Her gaze locked onto Frankie, sprawled on the ground, bloodied and broken. Her jaw clenched. "Jason," she said, her voice ice. Jason took a step back, his grip on the gun tightening. "Babe, Shut up!" The single command sent a ripple of terror through the clearing. The goons didn't move. They knew. Jason swallowed hard. "Alexis, listen, this isn't... You were going to kill my brother." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Jason paled. "No, He lied. He tricked us. Babe, you have to believe me. He's been manipulating you." Alexis tilted her head, studying him like he was an insect. Then, with terrifying calm, she said, "Shoot him." A single gunshot rang out. Jason gasped, stumbling, clutching his stomach. Blood seeped through his fingers. His eyes widened in disbelief. Alexis." He dropped to his knees. Alexis stepped forward, crouching in front of him. "You put your hands on my brother," she whispered, her voice so soft, so deadly. "You tried to kill him, and you thought I wouldn't find out?" Jason tried to reach for her, but she stepped back, disgusted. "You're nothing," she said coldly. "You were never worthy of me." Jason coughed, blood dripping from his lips. I loved you." Alexis smiled, but it was devoid of warmth. "You loved yourself." She nodded to one of her men. Another shot rang out. Jason collapsed, his body hitting the dirt. Dead. The silence that followed was deafening. The goons, realizing their boss was gone, immediately dropped their weapons, hands raised in surrender. Alexis didn't even glance at them. "Take them," she said. "Make them disappear." The men obeyed. Within seconds, the remaining goons were dragged off into the darkness. Alexis turned to Frankie. For the first time, her expression softened. "Frankie." She knelt beside him, her hands cupping his bruised face. He flinched. "It's okay," she murmured. "I'm here now." Tears welled in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. "You hesitated," he whispered. Alexis closed her eyes, her grip tightening. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself." She exhaled, opening her eyes again, fierce, determined. "But no one will ever hurt you again, I promise." Frankie wanted to believe her, but as he looked at Jason's lifeless body, at the blood staining the earth, he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The aftermath of Jason's execution lingered in the cold night air, the scent of blood mixing with the damp earth. Frankie sat there, his body weak, his mind spinning. Alexis's touch was gentle against his bruised face, but there was something else in her eyes now, something darker. Regret? Guilt? Or was it just calculation? Frankie couldn't tell anymore. He wanted to believe she was still the sister who had once shielded him from the world, who had once made him feel safe. But tonight had changed everything. Jason was dead. His body lay lifeless in the dirt, eyes wide open, blood pooling beneath him, his last breath stolen by the woman he had desperately tried to hold onto. The goons who had tormented Frankie were dragged away, their terrified screams swallowed by the dense forest. Whatever fate awaited them, he knew it wouldn't be kind. Alexis's men operated in shadows, erasing problems like whispers in the wind. There would be no evidence, no trace. Jason Carter never existed. "We need to leave," Alexis finally said, her voice steady, controlled. She gestured to her men, and within moments, strong hands lifted Frankie, supporting his weight. He winced as his injured knee throbbed, but he didn't resist. There was no point. He wasn't in control here. The SUVs were still running, their headlights illuminating the gruesome scene. As they moved, Frankie forced himself to glance back one last time at Jason's lifeless form. Just hours ago, this man had been Alexis's fiancé. Now he was nothing more than a body in the dirt. A warning. They drove in silence. The hum of the engine was the only sound, the tension suffocating. Frankie leaned his head back against the seat, his eyes drifting shut. His body screamed for rest, but his mind refused to quiet. How had it come to this? He had wanted to surprise Alexis, to reunite with the only family he had left. Instead, he had been mistaken for a plaything, beaten, almost killed, and now he sat beside his sister, unsure if he should still trust her. "You're thinking too much." Alexis's voice cut through the quiet. He opened his eyes, turning his head to look at her. Her expression was unreadable. "You don't have to be afraid of me, Frankie." He let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Should I be?" She didn't answer. The city lights flickered into view as they approached a high-rise building, sleek and towering, a fortress in the skyline. This wasn't just a home, it was a statement. Alexis had built an empire while he was gone, and now he was stepping into it, whether he wanted to or not. The moment they entered the penthouse, Alexis dismissed her men with a single nod. The door clicked shut, leaving them alone. Frankie sank onto the couch, exhausted. The adrenaline had faded, leaving only pain. His lip was swollen, his ribs bruised, his knee barely functional. He felt like a ghost of himself. "You need rest," Alexis said. But he caught the way her fingers twitched, the way her eyes darted away. She was hiding something. "What now?" he asked, watching her carefully. She hesitated. "We move forward." Just like that? His voice was sharper than he intended. "You killed him, Alexis. He was going to kill you." You hesitated. The words hung between them, heavy and unspoken. She flinched, just slightly, but it was enough. "I made a mistake," she admitted. And for the first time that night, she looked human, vulnerable. "I won't make it again." "And me?" he pressed. "What happens to me now?" Alexis knelt in front of him, her hands resting on his. "You're my brother," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You stay with me. No one touches you again." The promise should have been comforting. It wasn't. Something about the way she said it made it feel less like protection and more like a cage, a trap disguised as love. The following days blurred together. Frankie remained in the penthouse, recovering, while Alexis ran her world like a queen on her throne. He watched from the sidelines, realizing just how powerful she had become. People feared her, respected her, obeyed her without question. And for the first time, Frankie wondered if he even knew her at all anymore. Then came the night everything changed. Alexis had been acting strange all day, more distant, more tense. She had made calls in hushed tones, disappearing into her office for hours. Frankie could feel it in his bones. Something was coming. And then, just past midnight, the building shook. An explosion. The windows trembled, alarms blared. Frankie was thrown from his bed, hitting the floor hard. Smoke filled the air, the acrid scent of burning metal and destruction. Shouting, footsteps, gunfire, someone had attacked. Panic surged through him as he forced himself up, his body protesting every movement. He stumbled toward the door, just as Alexis burst in, gun in hand, blood splattered across her clothes. "We have to go," she shouted. "Now!" "What's happening?" he demanded. But she didn't answer. She grabbed his wrist, pulling him down the hall. The penthouse was in chaos. Her men were engaged in a brutal firefight, bullets tearing through walls, bodies hitting the floor. Whoever had come for them wasn't just sending a message. They were here to end this. Alexis's grip was bruising as she dragged him toward the emergency exit. "It's Jason's people," she said breathlessly. "His brother, he's not letting this go." Jason's brother. Frankie had never met him, but he had heard whispers. A man far more dangerous. A man who would stop at nothing for revenge. "We have to..." Alexis's words were cut off by a sharp, deafening bang. Frankie felt her body jerk, saw the way her eyes widened, the way her breath hitched. Then she collapsed. "No, no, no, no!" Frankie caught her before she hit the ground. Blood spread across her side, staining her white shirt. Her hands trembled as she reached for him, her lips parting as if to say something, but no sound came. "Stay with me," he begged, pressing his hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Footsteps approached. He looked up. A man stood there, gun raised, expression cold. Jason's brother. "You took mine," the man said simply. "Now I take yours." Another shot rang out. Frankie screamed. Darkness swallowed everything.